so I'm going to be walking us through our winter assignment, which is the Americas. Now, just as a quick heads up before we get into it, this video will be focused mostly on the artwork stemming from Mexico, and then I'll have future videos for the other regions. I have included New Spain in this unit from Content Area 3, so pulled from that content area a little bit just because it felt like it completed the story here. All of my sources I do pull from other AP instructors like Fleet, Douglas Derricott, Marcia Russell, as well as online sources, unfortunately, like Wikipedia, but other research articles that are linked in my notes section when I reference them. So heads up, always cite your sources, right? So we are going to go ahead and begin here talking about Mexico. I apologize for any mispronunciations of any of the titles, cultures, etc. I am trying my best with what I have learned how to pronounce it. Mexico is a very rich, densely super cultural area, and when we are looking at the works here, I am including Guatemala and a little bit of Central America as well, so not all typically Mexico, but that kind of valley of Mexico and the cultures that have influenced it. There are major civilizations in this region that we are going to be focusing on, including the Olmec, Maya, Toltec, and Aztec. We're really mostly focused on the Maya and the Aztec for the AP Art History test, but lots of culture happens in this region. Just as a quick overview, the Olmecs are one of the oldest civilizations that we have records of that have a ton of artistic examples. They're around 1500 BCE to 600 BCE. They're most known for these type of statues that you see here, where it's these almost kind of soft, almost baby-like features on adult male faces. These large statues, small works, they all have this very similar style of facial features. We don't know too much about them, but a lot of work has gone into trying to uncover this civilization. They did do things like agriculture of maize, beans, chili peppers, cottons. They had lots of pottery, fine art. It's very clear graphic and agricultural and architectural designs. The Maya are mostly based around the Yucatan Peninsula, more in the Guatemala region. They're around 250 CE to 600 CE. The Maya are major players of Mesoamerican history. They have a lot of deep, rich history within their own civilization. We're just kind of lumping it in. Whoops. Excellent works in pottery and science. They had a very beautiful hieroglyph system that's very pictorial that we'll look at. The Mayan calendar kind of creates this precedent of kind of astronomy, and their pyramid design is very, very notable. They have a step pyramid that, like Chichen Itza here, is very super Mayan, right? So very interesting, fascinating civilization. We only get to touch upon it. There's a hidden Tikal over there. So I do like to hide things in my slides, as you guys know. So yay, hi Tikal. Because that's one of their major cities, Tikal. I'm being funny. Toltecs we do not get to talk about too much. I just wanted to include them because they're another major civilization, 600 CE to 900 CE. They're more of the military-focused civilization. So lots of militarism, fighting, still very architecture, agriculture, economy, same kind of stuff happening, but they are more military focused, kind of like the Neo-Syrians to the Sumerians, kind of that kind of idea there. And then lastly, the Aztecs. The Aztecs from 1300 CE to 1521 CE. So this date is always weird just because when we are looking at all of our European examples, we're going chronologically and then we're jumping over to America, and our brains sometimes forget what time periods we're looking at. So this is about the Renaissance. So putting that into our brain, because that's going to be important as it butts up with Europe deciding to claim land as their own. But the Aztecs pretty much set up a lot of what Mexico is today. Mexico City starts with the Aztec Empire creating Tenochtitlan, very rich architecture, agriculture. Their agricultural advancements, guys, absolutely insane. The Chiapas are beautifully designed. The way they had to think about how to get food and resources to the people is crazy. So we'll get to look at that. Aztecs are the ones that are like notorious for human sacrifice, but that is not, you know, who they are. That is part of the culture, is to appease our gods and stuff. But just as a heads up, don't just go Aztecs, human sacrifice, and then move on. There's nothing else to them. Very, very cool culture we'll get into. So starting off with our first art piece here, we are looking at a piece from the Mayans. This is Yaxchitlan, and it is located in Chiapas, Mexico, date 725 CE. Media is limestone. So we are looking at an architectural complex, so meaning we have tons of buildings in this whole region, as well as we're going to be looking at some steles with some beautiful relief carvings that would have been painted. This region is densely forested, so a lot of Mayan buildings kind of got covered up by trees and lost to just people not living around them. So the Mayan stuff really has a beautiful greenery around it. Bloodletting, as an aside, this is going to be a really common ritual amongst the elite for the Mayans, and it's featured a lot in Mayan art. It's got a few different aspects to it. One is this idea of feeding the gods. When we're doing these big ceremonies, the Mayans are letting blood to kind of appease the gods and those spirits and kind of create order in the cosmos. So let the blood out to create this sense of stability. And that's partly because the rulers themselves were thought to be descendants from God. So letting the blood is showing that they are maintaining their power, keeping that community. And then another thing that's tied into it is when you lose a lot of blood, it tends to create some dizzy, fuzzy feelings in your brain. That's why people often faint if they bleed, right? So they are triggering that response, adding incense and the ceremonial factor, and they are creating hallucinogenic moments for the people who are bloodletting. Oftentimes, a lot of women got to partake in this ceremony. So it creates this kind of spiritual, we're looking into the gods' minds, hallucinations, because, oh my God, I'm losing a lot of blood, but it's a ceremonious religious experience that also kind of ties into the idea of rebirth and rejuvenation. So you let the blood to see, to feel, and to ground. That's the idea. Here's some pictures of Yaxchitlan. We have that beautiful forest I was talking about. There's some post lintels, a lot of trapezoids. Trapezoids kind of important in the design of these structures. And there's some of that hieroglyphic writing. Their writing is very square, kind of like pictures carved into squares there. When we are looking at the whole complex, it is set upon a hill, so we're looking at Acropolis high city, right? And there are several different like mountainy like peaks here that the central Acropolis here, and then other buildings around. So when we are looking at the structures for the test, we're looking at structure 23 and sometimes 33. So this is structure 23 right here. That's where we'll focus. And there is a river right along here. The pronunciation, I'm not going to try. But this is a major river that helps build the city, agriculture, resources, etc. We've talked about the importance of rivers next to cities. It is surrounded by dense jungle that helps with maintaining safety, militarism, etc. Lots and lots of buildings. So over like 100 structures and monuments, and then what it's really known for are those relief carvings. So we're going to see some carved stele and narrative stone reliefs on lintels that are spanning the doorways. So you can kind of see some lintel action right up there on this three doorway structure. There's that trapezoid look that I was talking about right there, some latticing. And what's fun, even though we're like, a hemisphere away, we see some similar design ideas. Like we have the idea of putting things up high, closer to the gods, closer and showing importance and cultural aspects. You put the big things on top of a mountain, important things go up higher. We see this breakdown into like 3 registers, even though they don't organize by registers. We see the 3 doorways, even though it has nothing to do with the Holy Trinity. This is where I really like that idea of people are people, and we love design aesthetics, right? Some more onto the visuals I'm going to get into a little bit more. So we're going to look at the lintels in particular a little bit closer, but these are those carved lintels. They're relief carvings. They have hieroglyphics. So you can see that hieroglyphics right there that kind of help explain the narratives. And they are also stele because they are stone slabs, right? And then this is structure 23. It is a yotut, again, pronunciation, which is a palace building. So with a palace building, you know that this is where the elite are, the royalty are, and our 2 main figures we're going to be looking at are Shield Jaguar II and Lady Shook. Those are important places. I highly recommend checking out ArtsQ video. They're kind of popping up, making lots of content. I love their stuff. But they'll walk through the comb roof, which is this latticing right there, and kind of explaining the whys and the interesting visual aspects. So check them out. I don't want to steal their views. Yeah, run away. There we go. Sorry about that. And then if you want a full breakdown of the structures, because we're only focusing on 23 here, and then the lintels, take a look at the Wikipedia. We love Wikipedia. Contextually with Yaxchilán, we are looking at one of the most powerful Mayan states. They broke up into these city-states because they're right by that river. That really helps maintain power and control in the Mayan civilization. Mayans existed from a really cool time period. They're going from antiquity to an early modern period, so they're kind of bridging in Europe, which is like kind of a very hot mess of a time period between like fall of Roman Empire and Byzantine and Germanic tribe here and doing that. So where Europe is very all over the place culturally, the Mayans are really like locked in. So it's fun to see the comparison in times. And then I have just kind of about the Mayan script. This is what like a character, one of the hieroglyphs looks like. They have a whole numbering system, math, astronomy, science, very important to the Mayans. This is how it would be read. So you can kind of see the blocking here. And then their style is very it's a really strong combination of geometry and organic design, so geometric and organic together, so it's locked in these squares, but the designs themselves are very organic, very fascinating style of hieroglyphs, very, very decorative. When we are looking at Yaxchilán, we are looking at the ruling dynasty. This is about 4th century CE, so prior to the fall of the Roman Empire over in Europe. But the height of Yaxchilán is under Lord Shield Jaguar II. He rules for 60 years. That is insane. Doing anything for 60 years sounds very exhausting. So good for him. And he starts in about 681. That's our late antiquity, not probably like early medieval, honestly, about where we're at. So looped fibulae, think of that time zone. And then we have Lady Cabal Shook. So we have woman representation here. Yay! This is his wife and the queen consort. Complicated. elite, lots of wife kind of things, but she is important. This is a very highly like recognized and esteemed role for her. So he commissions the site, and then his son kind of continues it, Bird Jaguar the Fourth. So this takes a long time, even with him reigning for 60 years. But we see a lot of Shield Jaguar and Lady Shook within this. There was a hiatus for about 150 years in between the buildings. That's why this complex is like so extensive, because they build, they wait a long time, they build some more, it kind of spreads out. So why are we focusing on Lady Shook more here? This is an interesting thing. We love our little feminism moments. We are looking at Lady Shook in the lintels that have been chosen by College Board, because she is the power here. He's wanting to promote his lineage and his power through her, through the power that she has. She is his principal wife, like number one wife, give her the power. So it's a weird, like, yay feminism, but what? Remember to keep our modern minds in check when we're looking at the past, right? But we see really cool, important role for royal woman. Here she is doing the bloodletting ritual. So she's the one that is having this big, important experience. It's hers, right? She has the power in these lintels. And he's using that power she has to help build his power as well. He's commemorating his victories in battle. He's saying, I'm awesome, but so is my first wife. Yay, Lady Shook. Here's 3 of the lintels here. And Lady Shook is really dominant in a lot of these. There is no hierarchical scale to like the traditional sense. Yes, she's like shorter in here, but it's because she is kneeling. So it's not like she is smaller. That's him, that's her. They're the same proportion and scale. And then here's a drawn out version, so you can kind of see some of those details that have been lost to time. So when we're looking at our first lintel here, and this is lintel 24, they love to number things. We're looking at sets of glyphs, these hieroglyphs here, and they're identifying exactly what event this is. So we know the date, October 24th, 709 CE, as it translates Mayan calendar, different than our calendar, but that's where it would have landed. And it's referring to the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn. So we're seeing that astronomical connection. The Mayans love studying the stars, very important to their culture, and we're seeing that right away in how they define their dates. Then we're seeing Shield Jaguar here holding a torch, suggesting that it's occurring at night, right? So this is happening in dark or in a dark chamber. It's dramatic, it's theatrical. We gotta add our lighting, so gives us a sense of the mood of the lintel. And we also have a lot of elaborate regalia, these patterned huipil worn by Lady Shook. So all those dense patternings, the head pieces, the jewelry, the accessories, it's all very elaborate, very dramatic. So what we're seeing with Lady Shook, see this little ropey? See how the ropey has some thorns? Owie, she's pulling it through her tongue. So it is a thorned cord, and she's pulling it through the tongue so that she can bleed onto a paper below that fills the basket on the ground before her, this down here being the basket. So this is the bloodletting ritual. She's shedding her blood to create the hallucinogenic thing that's going to happen in the next lintel, as well as showing that rebirth, that power, that stability. She is connecting to the cosmos, and he is there connecting to her and that connection. So it would have been dark with the fire going, and she's doing this very, to us, kind of intense, scary ritual to then connect to the larger universe. So both intimate and grandiose at the same time. Here he is wearing headdress here, and the back of the headdress would have had quetzal feathers, which is, we'll talk about the quetzal more with the Aztecs, but the quetzal feathers are indicating he's also going to let some blood in this ceremony. So even though this is focused on her, he will also partake. It is part of that regalia. He's got a headband on, which is appearing to represent the jester mask, which is a glyph for kingship and is named for the vegetation that comes from the crown of that. So this mask here is connecting to the idea of being a king and to agriculture. There's the rope falling on to an open codex. So that's that paper. It's kind of a book-like thing. Codexes are books. And that's where she is letting her blood fall so that she can then communicate with the gods and spirits, which we're going to see in the next lintel here. So in this lintel, because the rulers are believed to be descendants of gods, the act of bloodletting is going to help maintain that power and order and connect to the gods themselves. If you shed the blood of a god, you're going to connect to the god. That's the idea. The inscription up here, some more Mayan hieroglyphs. This one dates it October 20th, 681, the date of Lord Shield Jaguar's ascension to the throne. So we're getting historical writing. Again, this is translated to our modern calendar, not theirs. And we are showing that power and authority is important. So the monarchy, the kingship, that is important to the Mayan people. And by putting it onto this lintel, we're seeing that it is also important that the people recognize and understand the importance of historical writing, of kingship, and not being able to kind of question that power. So it's important to the Mayans to talk about these important events. This whole snake-like man, what's happening here is showing off what the hallucinations kind of look like. So the idea of these hallucinogenic, the incense burning, the lightheadedness from the blood. Lady Shook here is seen having a vision. So this is Lady Shook down here. This is the vision that she is happening. She is seeing a giant serpent with a warrior emerging from its mouth. So you can see the bottom jaw of the serpent there, top jaw there, warrior comes out there. So she is seeing the scene before her. We don't know the identity of the warrior because it is not something that is specifically written in their glyphs. Could be Shield Jaguar, could be a god, could be generic, we're not sure. The representation of them is idealized. So it's not looking specifically like individuals, it is an ideal. Lady Shook down here, she's holding a bowl in her left hand, looking up towards the serpent. And that bowl would have been probably where the incense was, or more regalia tied into that ceremony. She's wearing her headdress, elaborate bracelets, earrings, necklaces, and for the Mayans, their jewelry would have mostly been made out of jade. So jade being that beautiful, rich, green, turquoisey kind of color. So similar to China having jade be important, here the Mayans also find jade or jadeite important culturally. It's a sign of power, of wealth, of prestige. So imagine it all but green. Here's a close-up of her tongue going through that thorned cord from the previous lintel. And then our other lintel here, lintel 26, where this one's a lot more simple compared to the other two. I'm not even sure if College Board includes this one, but I like to show it just because it has a lot of detail on Shield Jaguar here. We have beautiful relief carving. So again, that backside has nothing, front side is where the detail is. It is carved in high relief, and they're doing it subtractively, so carving in, carving in, carving in. Lots of incised details, so making sure that the details are carefully incised as well, so cutting into the stone. This one is showing Lady Shook helping her husband dress for battle. You can see that depiction of the jaguar, so connecting the translation of his name to the animal that he is associated with. So powerful creature, strong. So this would have been a headdress. And then wearing his military uniform. The lintels would have been painted. We know that the Mayans created a pigment we call Mayan blue. It would have been bright, very brilliant. I'll have examples in a second, but we also probably have red. Red loves to stick to stone even when it's pretty much all gone, but you could see some traces of red on Lady Shook's clothing as well. Here's that Mayan blue here. So if you want to learn about Mayan blue, it comes from that anyl plant, and they mix that with clay, and that would have created this blue paint. Very bright, very beautiful, intense pigmentation. Most of it lost to time. And then before finishing off Yaxchilan, you can see with the style of their face, we also see a lot of profile work, and the way that their faces are depicted is the ideal for the Mayans. The kind of larger, smoothed out nose, the smaller forehead, these high eyes, these larger lips, this sloping face is ideal beauty standard. So that's why they have very similar features, is because that's the ideal. So think back to the Greek ideals, think back to the ideals of the Bundu mask, different ideals, different features, but people love to be their like prettiest, perfectest self in all their art, right? That's the ideal filter. So just wanted to mention that before we move on. Here's artworks from Mayans, just to show kind of that different style, some of their pottery, more relief carvings, more traces of that Mayan blue and the red on different lintel and relief carvings there. And then Chichen Itza is kind of an important pyramid that I don't know why is not in the 250, but you know, there we are. Another Mayan example. And that is it for the Mayans. So we just get the one and then we get to move on to Aztecs. Yay! So our next piece here is Templo Mayor. This is our Aztec piece. Aztecs were also known as the Mexica people. It is not Mexica, it is Mexica. And they found their main capital city at Tenochtitlan. And Tenochtitlan is modern day Mexico City. There's still remnants of Templo Mayor there. And it really establishes what Mexico is going to become. The Aztecs are also where we brush up with European colonialism. So this date of 1375 to 1520 is right in the heart of the Aztec Empire and also leading to its eventual downfall because of European colonization. There's 4 different elements College Board is having us look at. Templo Mayor is the main one, so the main temple within Tenochtitlan. There's also the calendar stone or the sunstone, the Coyolxauhqui stone, and the Olmec style mask. So it's a larger complex. These are the ones that we are focused on. So that's exactly what I was just saying. There we go. So those are the 4 pieces. Templo Mayor. So this is a reconstruction of it. It no longer exists as it currently stands, but you can kind of see already this very majestic building. And it is kind of like the White Temple on Ziggurat back in Sumer, where they're creating a grand staircase and putting a temple on top. So it acts as an Acropolis type look by putting, again, that important, very important part of culture up high. So grand staircases. These staircases are insane. And then they put their most important temples to 2 of their most important gods right at the top. There is a lot going on with Templo Mayor that we are going to get into. But just to kind of place everything, there are 2 gods that we are looking at, Tlaloc and Huitzlopochtli. and each temple represents those two different gods. There are sacrificial stones at the top here. The Chakmul, we'll talk about in a second, is up here. The Koyalkakshi stone is at the bottom. Interesting why it's at the bottom of the stairs. We'll get to that. Here's, unfortunately, the remnants of Templo Mayor today. You can kind of see those interior kind of staircases, not the exterior as much, and where the Koyalkakshi stone would be placed. So not a ton left, but they still have this area sectioned out as a way to remember the Aztec Empire. Here's a look at that Koyalkakshi stone. We're looking at relief carvings. Very interesting approach to representing a figure. Here is the sunstone, another relief carving. So if you're looking at this compared to the Mayans, they look kind of similar stylistically, where they're bridging geometry and organic together, but the Aztecs are going to approach their designs a little bit different. The Olmecs, that is a different group of people talked about earlier, but the Aztecs are going to have an Olmec mask. This is jadeite at Templo Mayor, there for a reason. Here's some drawings of what Tenochtitlan would look like, thinking about how the whites and the bright colors would have contrasted against the sky. This is a city that was built on a lake, and it is very exquisite and expensive and beautiful. You can see those two mountains in the back. Those two mountains also represent Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli. So they're referencing with the temples the two mountains that are in the landscape. So there's what the sizing of Templo Mayor would have been. That's what we're seeing here, this like interior of the temple, not the exterior stairs. There are serpent sculptures that are still remaining. There would have been more at the base of the templo. I like this picture a lot because it shows this reconstruction model, as well as a picture of what Tenochtitlan would have looked like. So Mexico City was a lake, basically, and the Aztecs are going to build their city on this lake. So they have to become masters of water management in order to sustain this city and control the lake and its resources, and they do it beautifully. We've kind of discussed a few of these vocab terms: monolith, large stone, mono, one, stone, lith, right? So we're looking at a big old stone. Tenochtitlan is the city. We are going to see the introduction of Spaniards, so people from Spain. The Spanish people are going to come in. Chiampas. So Chiampas are that water management system that really takes the Aztecs, makes them super successful. So it is this irrigation system where they're planting their agriculture with water channels in between. And I like this model. It shows the boats going back and forth. So you would do your cultivation and use the lake, but control it so you're not like drowning the plants. So these channel systems, these chiampas, are how they are able to sustain a whole city on a lake. So when we are looking at Templo Mayor, it is massive. This is 90 feet high. That's like stacking two splash mountains on top of each other about. It's covered in stucco. Stucco's that kind of like rough material you see on the outside of houses. Two very large staircases leading up to seemingly identical temple towers. One temple, like I said, was for Huitzilopochtli, the other for Tlaloc, and that's to look like the heavenly mountains. It's also all elevated on a large platform. We see this often with important temples. Think Great Mosque at Djenné. They put things up higher to show that it is important in society. And if you're climbing up these steps, you do have to pass by two different sacrificial stones. So Aztecs were known for their human sacrifice, and this was to appease the gods. they wouldn't do just, pure human sacrifice. There's animal sacrifices. Animal sacrifices are very common across all cultures, but it's the idea of giving something up to the gods to show your respect and honor of them. The city, and then thusly like the capital itself, is divided into 4 quadrants. So we see this division here. Usually anytime we see quadrants like this, it is based around our cardinal directions, north, west, south, and east. And they're doing this on purpose to show off the Mexica cosmos. So the idea in the Mexica culture is that you have these kind of 4 parts that come together around our axis mundi. Axis mundi being that central point. So just like Buddhism, Hinduism, those kind of religions having a key point that is the center of the universe. The lake itself is Lake Texcoco. This is a shallow lake, so when you're thinking, how did they build it on a lake? It's because it's shallow. It's not like a super deep lake, and that's why it's not there like this anymore. But this means that the city is surrounded by water. Great fortification. So very well thought out militarily, as well as commanding it agriculturally. So when we are looking at Templo Mayor, we are looking at honoring the 2 main gods in which those temples are dedicated to. So we have Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli. So Tlaloc is a deity of water and rain and associated with agriculture. Of course, they are going to worship a god that is associated with water and agriculture because this is a city on water. It's an empire, it's strong, and the backbone of every society is really based on how well they can manage their resources. Food, water, etc. So this god is dedicated to that. So he's worshipped as a giver of life and of sustenance. The home of Tlaloc is Popocatépetl. Sorry, pronunciation again. But this is one of those mountains that we saw in the previous picture. It is, I believe, a volcanic mountain, and that is said to be his home. He's feared, pretty intense god, but not maliciously so. It's more of that like fear and awe because of Tlaloc's power over things like hail and thunder and lightning and rain. He's often associated with caves and springs and mountains. And sacrifices are going to be held in his name. So this is human sacrifice, not all the time. There's animal sacrifices too, but that is what's going to happen. And part of Templo Mayor and those grand staircases is the idea that a person will get sacrificed on a sacrificial stone and the blood will drip down the steps and kind of show that movement of blood and this like cosmic force that shows the power of that sacrifice, feeding the god, not feeding like actually feeding, but like spiritually satisfying the gods. Huitzilopochtli is another super important deity and one that you may be more familiar with if you are, Mexican, Mexico, you have seen this flag before because Huitzilopochtli is the patron deity of the Mexica, so of this cultural group. He's associated with warfare, fire, the sun. He's going to wield this fire serpent as a weapon, the Xuicotl. And the imagery of Huitzilopochtli is really tied into this imagery of the eagle eating the snake on the nopal cactus. And the story there is that Huitzilopochtli said to the Mexica, when you find this eagle eating the snake on top of the cactus, that is where your homeland will be. So that will be the place for the Mexica. So they traveled and they found this image of the eagle eating the snake on the cactus, and that is where Tenochtitlan was built, as the story goes. Ritual sacrifice also is given to Huitzilopochtli, as well as bloodletting. So like the Mayans, that kind of continues forward in the Aztecs as well. When we are looking at the 2 temples, just to kind of highlight each temple. The temple for Huitzilopochtli is going to be where those sacrificial stones that we're looking at, especially the Coyolxauhqui stone, is at the base of the Huitzilopochtli temple. So a reminder that the temples are at the top of the grand staircases. At Huitzilopochtli's, we have the standard bearer figures, these guys here, that are going up and decorating the stairs. They probably held some sort of paper banners, feathers, things that are decorative and showing kind of that awe and inspiration towards Huitzilopochtli. Think of it like mortuary temple to Hatshepsut, where as you progressed up the stairs, there'd be statues along the way. So that's what the standard bearers are. It's holding standards, remember standard of war, flags, etc. At the base of the temple, we have two undulating serpent balustrades. So a balustrade is these kind of railings that you see in houses. Like a baluster is one of the pillars, and then when you put them all together, it's a balustrade, like an arcade or a colonnade. Same kind of idea. Here we're using serpents, though. So serpents are a very powerful animal, especially in Central and South America. So when we think about our powerful animals we've talked about before that have come up in our lions, elephants, ox, I can't even think anymore, birds, eagles, all those kind of stuff. Depending on where you're at, the power animals shift, right? So there's no lions in Mexico, so they're going to look at the animals that are powerful to them and create art based off of those powerful animals. And one of those that we see a lot are snakes. You also see jaguars and those kind of creatures that are Central America focused, right? They exist there, so you're going to create art off of those. At the bottom is that Coyolxauhqui monolith. That's the colorized version down here. And it would have been kind of tying into the story of Huitzilopochtli. And we're going to get into that a little bit with the Coyolxauhqui stone itself. The temple is symbolizing Coatepec, so one of the mountains. And it's honoring Huitzilopochtli and the triumph over Coyolxauhqui and Huitzilopochtli's brothers as that patron deity. The fun thing, and I love this part, is that people are people. People like to party, and we love to have any excuse to gather, eat good food, hang out with family, that kind of cultural community element. And part of the Huitzilopochtli ceremonies was the ritual of Panquetzaltli. Wow, that was bad. But it was a banner-raising ceremony in honor of Huitzilopochtli's triumph, and people would dance, they would give gifts, and they ate tamales. So very similar to what we do in conquering our tests and having our wonderful little mini parties in honor of our conquest over knowledge. So I like that. The other temple is the temple for Tlaloc. Some keynote things that are different because of Tlaloc's association with water is we're going to have different offering vessels. We're going to have different animals. So instead of the snakes, we see frogs. Frogs often associated with rain, rainy water, and therefore Tlaloc. It's the altar of the frogs at the very bottom, the base of Tlaloc's side of the temple. And we also have this chacmul. A chacmul is this type of sculpture. It's a little bit older than Aztec, but they continue to use it. And a chacmul is going to be this figure with an offering vessel here. So people could put offerings into that vessel that is sitting on his abdomen. So these two things are kind of close to each other on the same axis. Frogs are looking upwards because they're looking for the rain. You got to think of the rain. We do see some remnants of paint, which is always really fun when that survives. So the chacmul having the red and the blue kind of gives a better idea of how bright and colorful this would have been. The temple itself would have been symbolizing the mountain of sustenance or Popocatépetl, again pronunciation, but this was more of the a fertile mountain. It had lots of rain. It allowed lots of crops to grow. Again, I forget which one's volcanic, if they're both, my bad. But this one associated with Tlaloc, god of sustenance, god of rain. Mentioned stuff before, but going into context here, we're looking at Templo Mayor as part of Tenochtitlan, which is in the middle of Lake Texcoco. It was established in 1325 and was kind of this foundation for where their Templo Mayor would be built. The temple gets expanded, enlarged, reconstructed, lots of building phases, almost like most of our architecture pieces that are temples have periods of reconstruction, rebuilding, and additions added. So no different, even different locations. And these building phases would have matched the different rulers of the Aztec Empire, or the Tlatoani, which are the speakers taking office, would also be part of this building plan. Construction sometimes wasn't all just for funsies. Sometimes it was to handle things like, oops, the city flooded because we're on a lake. My bad. It rained too much. So it was both practical and aesthetic redoing. More contextual, we have kind of talking about the gods again, going into Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli, connecting with the idea of war and life together, that duality. We have it representing the two different hills that are connected to the gods. We have a sacred ball court and skull rack located at the foot of the stairs, which is a little intense. The ball court, if you've ever seen El Dorado, has like this hoop that you would hit the ball through the hoop, very similar to like basketball, but the hoop's on the side and the rules are a little bit different. But the skull rack there to kind of mimic Huitzilopochtli's triumph over like Coyolxauhqui and all the brothers. There's also layers here, like Shrek. The temple has layers, and the layers are intentional to kind of mimic the idea of their cosmos, which we'll get into with the sunstone. But everything's lined up with the cardinal direction, and then the layers refer to this kind of cyclical process of rebirth and destruction, chaos, and order that the Aztecs believe in. Unfortunately, speaking of El Dorado here, the temple is destroyed and buried by the Spaniards. And that's mostly led by Hernan Cortez and his crew. So Europe's doing its thing, and it's like, oh, wow, we can steer our boats better because Silk Road trade with China. We are getting better at navigation techniques. Let's get into trading, and trading sounds fun, but instead of trading, let's just like own our trade networks and push into the economy a little bit more forcefully. And so vessels that are sponsored by European monarchs are sent off with these leaders of these conquests that first start as trying to find different passages to get to the Eastern Asia, India, Indonesia, where like spices are, like trying to find a faster way than the Silk Road. Eventually, we found a gigantic landmass we didn't know was there since the Vikings. And they don't have guns, so what if we take it over? That was their kind of thought, was we gotta conquer this area. It is ours to have. It's free for the taking, which obviously not okay, but it is what happened. So the Spanish are going to send out conquistadors, which includes Hernan Cortez, and he finds the Aztec Empire. The story gets a little funky because of the records and stuff. But it starts as like this mutual discussion stuff. Cortez and leader of the Aztecs, Moctezuma II, talk, but then it leads to fighting, and Cortez seizes the emperor 1519, orders the destruction of all the Aztec religious relics. He says this area is ours, this is for Spain, which leads into the Spanish conquest in 1521. The temple, as a representation of Aztec mythos, is destroyed, all the relics ruined, stones were pulled to rebuild new Spanish structures, and the remnants of it were buried. And that's why you see the remnants as they are in Mexico City today. It's because Cortez ordered this destruction of this beautiful architectural city. Basically, the entire city was gone. And then that leads to the new viceroyalty of New Spain. Like New York, but New Spain. This is Spain number 2. I'm gonna go forward. Here's images of that human sacrifice drawings to kind of show that very dramatic essence of tying into the cosmos and the blood being spilled for the gods, which gets into the Coyolxauhqui stone. But first we'll talk about the sunstone. Here's our sunstone here, also called the calendar stone. Doesn't really function as a calendar, so sunstone is a lot more accurate. You can see that reference to the sun with these little triangle visual motifs here. And this is a beautiful relief carving in basalt. Basalt is the same type of rock that was used in Nanmadol. It's that one that kind of quote unquote grows into like hexagons. Wild rock. Love basalt. She fun. It would have been painted as brightly colored as everything else that we have seen. And this sunstone really tells the story of the cosmos. So the cycle of life, death, rebirth, kind of similar to Hinduism in a way of it being seen as a circle. Europe is very centered on a line, like a timeline, a physical line, right, of past, present, future, and it just keeps going down that path. The Egyptians believed that, the Greeks believed that, so on and so forth. That's why Europe to America, we kind of see time as linear. Not every culture does. A lot see it as this cyclical nature. So each little animal here represents a different era of time within the cosmos. So the Aztecs looked at time as the entire world was created and destroyed and then created again. So that's what their cycle is: creation, destruction, creation, destruction. And that destruction would only happen when the people were basically at their worst. So kind of like Mandate of Heaven, but on a cosmological level, where I guess kind of like Rapture, right? So like if people start being terrible, that's when the world would end. The gods would come and they would take over and destroy it, gone, right? And then restart the world anew. And that was real deep Aztec cosmology, but it's barely scratching the surface. When we look at the visuals, we're looking at a face in the center. It has deep set eyes, a very wide open mouth. We have ear ornaments hanging on the side, a tongue sticking out, and then this radial balance going around, almost in this very horror vacui approach to design. Almost every space is filled. So if you are interested in the full cosmology and understanding the sunstone, I would highly check out the Smart History video. Take a look at the breakdown here, because it does give a full breakdown of what the heck is happening in each of these little sections. And we can see that it is marking time because, again, their writing is marking literal years. 13 Reed would have been 1479, which is the year of the fifth sun. We have serpent motifs. We have that central face that's probably a different god, Tonatiuh. Again, bad pronunciation. Not quite sure if it's him or not, so we don't like to nail that down until we know for sure. We have it acting like a compass, cardinal directions. These are the different eras that I was talking about. So 4 wind, 4 jaguar, 4 water, 4 rain are the different eras of time. Oop, there we go. And then here's some more images so you can see the relief is really pretty on it, and it is big. So very large stone. Coilcoxi is another relief carving, circular stone. So we see again this kind of circle motif, circle cosmological thinking, but very different approach. Where the sunstone has radial balance, Coilcoxi stone does not. That's because this one functions as a sacrificial stone. Again, we have basalt, which is a volcanic stone. We have this large relief carving, so monolith, large stone, one large stone. It would have been painted red, orange, white, blue based off of the pigments left behind. There's some different coloration versions. And this would have been at the very base of the Huitzilopochtli side of the temple. We see here a dismembered nude female. So the female nude is going to be something we see in a lot of European art. Here, the context and visual representation, way different. So we see much, she's dismembered, right? Her arms, legs are not attached. You see bones poking through. You see like traces of what looks like it should be blood. There's skull motifs to kind of show that she gone, she dead. But she is also nude because that is meant to humiliate her. So she has her breasts out, her body is on display because she has been killed and dismembered and basically thrown off a mountain to be splayed on the ground flat in this pinwheel type shape to create this sense of movement. It is meant to remind people that Huitzilopochtli is not meant to be messed with because they did this to Coilcoxi. So if you try to rise up, this is what happens to you. It's very intense, kind of authoritarian way of reminding people to not defy the gods. Coilcoxi was a deity herself. Her name meant bells on her face or bells on cheeks. And so she had power theoretically until she defied Huitzilopochtli. This is very chaotic compared to the sunstone, lots of chaos. The stretched belly we see, we had that in Egypt, so she was a mother. And it's a pretty intense scene, that decapitation, the dismemberment, the nudity, all to humiliate her. Here's a crack outlined, so it did break at one point, but the majority of it is still fine. If you look at the difference between the sunstone and the Coilcoxi stone, you can really take a look at how these are both like super similar, but very different at the same time. We have that radial balance on sunstone versus asymmetrical, that pinwheel kind of balance on Coilcoxi stone. We have in sunstone symbolic references to time and ages, and we have serpents and hands holding hearts, and it's very unified and not so chaotic, very designed, organized, right? Where Coilcoxi is this goddess, she's a goddess of the moon. In warrior attire, she's dismembered, it's chaotic, it's more about a person instead of time. So it's of one god versus all of the cosmos. So the scale of the story of the narrative is a lot smaller in Coilcoxi stone than on the sunstone. We also have arrows. So we have a very clear indication of cardinal directions in sunstone, where Coilcoxi stone has movement and chaos through diagonals. So if you see like that pinwheel design, strong diagonals, the design here is more large composition than compartmentalized horror vacui of the sunstone. Very, very different approaches visually. They do share some similarities. We both are depicting gods, deities in Aztec culture. Both are circles. Both are carved with a blend of low and high relief. They both have their moments to shine those types of relief. They both would have been painted. Both are very stylized. Both made out of basalt, and most likely both would have been lying flat down. We know Coyolxauhqui stone was. It is debated with sunstone, but most likely. Functions are very different. Function for sunstone is give or take a calendar, again, more of a cosmological calendar than a follow it calendar. And Coyolxauhqui stone was a sacrificial stone, so the blood would have dripped onto the Coyolxauhqui stone, showing off that, like, Huitzilopochtli's offerings are still kind of in the face of Coyolxauhqui. The sunstone depicts this 5th era, which is where the Aztecs currently think the world is in at this point, because they had the four different eras, right? The 4 animals, or rain was one of them. But each era ends with death. They think they're in the 5th era. So one era ends with death by jaguars, death by wind, death by rain, and then death by water. So it's counting down to the, like, death of, not counting down, but it's just marking that we're in the 5th era, according to them at that time. And then the sunstone also uses those cardinal directions to just match that cosmology of the Aztecs. Tenochtitlan is split into 4 based on cardinal directions. Sunstone is as well. Coyolxauhqui is depicting the death of Coyolxauhqui. Nudity is shown, very uncommon for the Aztecs. So again, it's about humiliating her. And then it's on the base of the temple, in which the idea is to represent her being shoved off the mountain and lying flat on the floor, dismembered. They both depict a theme of sacrifice, so sacrifice is still part of it. The sunstone shows the creation of the world through the sacrifice of the gods. Again, end of each era, while Coyolxauhqui shows the dismemberment of one woman of that sacrifice, as well as having the function of sacrificial stone. Circles themselves are both important visually to that cosmology of the Aztecs. As it relates to Tenochtitlan, again, time is cyclical. Here's some more images again. All right, the Olmec mask. So Olmec mask was found. This is a smaller mask. It would not have been worn on the face. It would have been more just indicating the idea of a mask. I've seen one in person, and it was like super tiny, like almost thumbnail size. But they do come in a large range of sizes. This one would have been made by the Olmecs. It was small and a small polished sculpture made out of jadeite. It's got a nice, rich, dark, deep green color and hue to it. It was found at Templo Mayor. And we see that it is a human face, stylized, with this kind of babification that we have seen with the Olmecs. Almond eyes, we have a cleft in the head, upturned lips. So this style is super Olmec. The Aztecs looked at the Olmecs almost like how we're looking at the Aztecs here, where we're looking back in time. And the Aztecs connected themselves to the Olmecs as a strong people of the past. The Aztecs saw themselves as a strong people of the present. So having a relic of an older civilization kind of showed off the power of the Aztec people. So it would have been valuable to the Aztecs at the time. Having it in their main temple would have shown that they had this power and authority. See, there's me with the tiny little Olmec mask. So super cute. Other Olmec stuff and Aztec stuff in the back there. Here's some more images. This is how big this one is. So more the size of your hand. And then there's some more Olmec pieces like we saw at the beginning of these slides. We do have one other Aztec piece here that is tied into Tenochtitlan and the story of Cortez conquering the Aztecs. But this one is a feather headdress, not architecture, so this one should go a little faster. This is ruler's feather headdress, probably of Moctezuma II, cannot confirm, as stated by College Board there. Culture is Mexica or Aztec. Dates 1428 to 1520, so we're seeing the fall of the Aztec Empire right around the corner with the Spanish conquest. Media, feathers, we have Quetzal and Cotinga bird feathers here and gold. So beautiful piece here. And a little controversial at the moment, this artwork. We'll get into that. Here's a close-up here. You could see the very detailed feathering here, the different type of bird feathers that we see, the gold that is woven through the headdress at the different layers. Beautiful radial balance. There is, so like the original and the reconstruction, so you're going to see different, like, original headdress, and then there's some reconstruction versions as well. So the reconstruction is a little bit brighter and has more of the golden stuff back on it. Reconstruction being like a replica, basically. When we are looking at the visuals of the feather headdress, we are looking at something to go on your head that is 3.8 feet tall and 5 3/4 feet wide, which is insane. So we have, I don't know, we'll say like that's my height wide, basically. So if I was lying across, the feathers stretch all the way out to be my height. So this would have been a big, elaborate display to wear on the head. It's meant to show off that power, authority, ceremonial prestige, this kind of spiritual connection, all of that. Just through scale alone, scale and proportion, really playing a dominant force in the feather headdress. When we're looking at the feathers, and we'll look at the breakdown in a little bit, we see the Quetzal bird. Quetzal is a very important bird, similar to our Hawaiian ahu'ula. We have this picking of just 2 to 3 feathers at a time, right? So they only have 2 to 3 of these big, beautiful green feathers. So they'll pluck them, return them. So it takes about 450 tail feathers. So that's like divide by 2, right? 225 Quetzals. Insane. Quetzals are tied to one of the deities, Quetzalcoatl. So having this bright green not only shows this like rich, like wealthy status, but also that connection to the gods. We see the blue feathers are the Cotinga bird. We have rosette spoonbill feathers, and all of this is layered in semicircles. So beautiful radial balance. So center point radiates out. The gold ornaments going through are plates of gold, and they're woven into the feathers. They also would have had a golden bird beak here, but that is no longer there. We see that in the replica, but not in the real one anymore. And then the gold would have been sewn on in the gold detailing. So here's the different birds that they used. And then I'll move forward there so you can kind of see the layout. So here's the Quetzal. That's the green tail feather. They would have used the wing feathers for the smaller ones. The rosette spoonbill is a pink bird, so you could see little touches of pink in between those 2 gold layers. The blue Cotinga is those blue feathers there. And I forget what the other bird is, but that one. Because they're working in feathers, and we touched those feathers on the uli uli in class, oils really deteriorate feathers. They disappear, they disintegrate. It is not meant to last forever and ever and ever. Beautiful, but they decay. So this is in a state where it is constantly decaying, like almost everything. But it's not at its highest like visual like luxury that it once was. And what is the last? Feathers of the squirrel cuckoo. There we go. It's a cuckoo bird. I knew I wrote it down somewhere. So that, again, is the layers there. Context-wise, we're looking at here's the replica here with the bird beak on it. We're looking at a Mexican piece of an Aztec leader that was super important to the foundation of Mexico. Remember the whole like eagle, cactus, snake thing? Aztec connection there. And yet the headdress is currently sitting in Austria in Europe. So Mexico's been asking for the headdress back because they don't have an Aztec headdress in Mexico. And Austria's like, but it's gonna fall apart if we send it. And Mexico's like, figure it out. So it's kind of been this standstill in which Mexico doesn't have a big, important Aztec piece in their own country. So that's the controversy there. The feather headdresses would have been created by Amanteca, and the Amanteca were feather workers that worked in Tenochtitlan, and the feather workers, very similar again in Hawaii, where you have the ahu'ula, this like kind of spiritual aspect of creating and weaving feathers is imbued into their work. So the Amanteca were a revered people and artisan in the Aztec society because of their beautiful work with feathers. The headdress would have been part of a costume. The costumes or regalia would have been used in rituals, performances, battles. Again, we don't know if it was actually used by Moctezuma or if it was someone of similar status or just part of a ritual. We're unsure. And we're actually unsure if it was used as a headdress, even though it looks very headdressy in its design. It also matches kind of what we see in the codices. So a codex is a book, right? So it matches what we see with headdresses that would have been used in festivals by priests. So similar to priest headdresses in festivals of but it also matches objects seen in other codexes, such as the Quetzal feathered battle standard, which is what we see here. So this kind of, again, flag standard type thing where it looks like it could match that same shape, style, etc. And it doesn't match what the Aztecs illustrated their nobility in. So it doesn't match headdresses of the nobility. It does match standards. It does match priests' headwear. But it's a big question mark, and we don't have the records to confirm one way or the other. Here's some other feather work of the Amanteca. They make feathers look like it's paint. It is insane, the detail and specificity of feather work that the Amanteca do. It is a very highly regarded skill and role in that Aztec society, and they use these colorful feathers from the different tropical birds. That's why we see, a lot more like colors versus the ahu'ula, right? So the environment changes the type of creatures, which it changes what we see visually. A little bit more context just to kind of repeat some of this stuff a little and then add some more. Quetzalcoatl is that god I mentioned. It is a serpent god that we see here. Also has the form of human. But this is a god related to wind, Venus, sun, merchants, arts, crafts, knowledge, learning, very wide god. But you'll see images of Quetzalcoatl a lot even today. And the god's association with Aztec priesthood also leads into this idea that it could be a priest's headdress because of the Quetzal feathers. It's got this magical spiritual energy to it. The material, despite like, okay, yeah, there's birds. Getting the birds, getting those feathers, getting the gold, and all of the like tiny stuff that goes into Amenteca's works are showing how powerful the Aztec Empire is. This is a show of power. If you can make something that requires all of these luxury items, including other things like turquoise, cacao, obsidian, jade, all of that, then it is showing that the Aztecs are capable, controlling enough to lead a strong empire that can take all of these items, right? So if you can control trade confidently to have luxury goods, then you are number one empire. So the Aztecs do these kind of works to show off. So this headdress at some point was sent to Tenochtitlan, which is the Aztec capital, and it's showing that the Aztecs have authority in this region in which the headdress comes from. And then Cortez again, ruining things, did his conquistador stuff, killed the Aztecs, toppled Tenochtitlan, and then they stole whatever they wanted. They burned, looted, stole. He comes across the headdress, he sends it to Charles V in Europe, which is a king, but there's also confusion of if it was a gift, or they're like, you have this cool thing and I want it. So Europeans fight amongst themselves as well over the goods of people that were killed. To get into Moctezuma, because I mentioned him a few times of like, oh, it was probably Moctezuma, but who the heck is Moctezuma? For those who don't know, Moctezuma II is the 9th emperor of the Aztec Empire. He reigns from around 1503 to 1520. He is this last monarch that meets with Cortez, and Cortez is the one who conquers. So that's where Moctezuma versus Cortez here, Aztec versus Europe. Moctezuma himself in his reign changed the like kind of hierarchy system, which is crazy. It was very meritocratic before, so based on merit, and he widens the divide between the nobles of the commoners. He prohibits commoners from working in royal palaces. It creates this friction. So there's a lot of issues that are going in prior to Cortez, but with Europe's meeting of Moctezuma, the Aztecs, Mesoamerica, this is that turning point in American history. And he is killed in those initial stages of the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire. I have a really cool video of a Mexican dancer doing civic activism. So Gamora is a activist for the Mexica people. He does these Quetzal headdress. He wears the Quetzal headdress kind of attire. He performs dances from the Aztecs. Really interesting modern kind of look at the activism to keep and maintain the Mexica culture and keep it alive. And you can see that in the approach to the featherwork throughout the regalia, and then how it translates to the dances. You can get a sense and feel for how the feather headdress would have looked on a person and moving. Feathers move, they're lightweight. So really cool. Check him out if you want to learn more about that civic activism that he does. And that is it on Mexico. So make sure anything that was confusing, you go back through, you ask questions, and always thank you guys for watching.